Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is part 3 of the Store-Bought Phalaenopsis series, and this is endearingly entitled What's in My Pot? Now obviously if I take these out of the pot I will repot them straight away, but I'm going to do the repotting as a separate video. This is getting them out of the pot and inspecting what's going on and making some decisions. Yeah. So first thing to do is get the stake off, and we will do our best not to damage the blooms. Now some say you shouldn't repot when something's in bloom. I've never found it a problem as long as all the buds are open. If you have a spike on a Phalaenopsis with quite a few unopened buds at the top, I would recommend at least waiting until they're all open. Oh, and you'll all be pleased to hear we do have a name for one of them. I've actually done a video about how to find out about names, which I'll post later. There's no urgency on that. What it's called is not going to have any effect on what we're doing or its health or anything else. Knowing what it's called, it's just a name. You can call it Fred if you like. Now this is deciding not to come out, which probably means we've got a root coming out through the bottom. There we go. Right, first thing to say was the bottom of the pot was full of media with very, very few roots in it. Yeah? Now these are epiphytes. Yeah? It's what's left of a plug in the centre, most of which is disintegrated. That's good. Yeah. These are epiphytes. They grow on trees, and some of their roots will hang on to the piece of tree that they've managed to get a hold of. Some of them would be in the air, where they can take in moisture and things from the air. They're adapted to do that. But they are epiphytes. They need air around their roots, and therein lies the main decision for what you pot them in. It must have air. So dirt, soil, potting compost, no. Basically it's far too compressed, compacted, and as you water it, it will become more so. So no, you need to get some proper orchid media. Now what we've got here is quite a good root system. That's what a dead root looks like. Yeah, it'll be soggy, papery, and if you tug it, it just falls apart. Yeah, and strictly speaking, these are not roots. That's the root, that tiny little filament. What this is a covering, which orchids again have adapted, called velamen, and it works like a sponge. So if it rains, this part soaks in that moisture really fast and holds it, and then the little root inside can take what it needs as and when it needs it, up to the point where the velamen dries out. Obviously then there's nothing left. Now these come from tropical forests. They like to be warm, and quite honestly, these mass-produced hybrids are really probably the least fussy orchid you'll ever get. They'll put up with all sorts of abuse up to a point. Yeah? I'm just trying to tease off as much of the old bark, old media as possible. Doesn't matter if a few bits are left on there, but I'm trying to get as much off as I can. Right, now what we've got here is quite a good root system, but it's not actively growing in any shape or form. All of the root tips have stopped. Yeah, that's about the only one that looks like it's active. An active root will have a different colour on the end of it, normally a sort of purplish colour, purplish red, sometimes bright green. Yeah, but it will be a different colour, and it will be the last sort of centimetre or so of the root. That's an active growing tip. As you can see, these roots are capable of branching. They're not just a single shoot. If you look at this root coming down here, yeah, it started there, pushed out a little branch there that failed, pushed out that long one right over here, yeah, carried on growing, pushed out to the side and carried on growing, so they can branch. So if one gets damaged, yeah, near the end, it'll branch out. They naturally branch, and as such they form quite a good little root system as they go along. Okay, let me just put that down for a second, being careful with the bloom spike obviously. Now over here I've got my trimming scissors. These are actually bonsai scissors, bonsai pruning shears, which are very robust, incredibly sharp, and made of stainless steel, so they don't get manky. Now those are not soaking in Jack Daniels, they're soaking in rubbing alcohol, and it's that basically. It's a sterilizing solution, yeah? So it's isopropyl rubbing alcohol at 70%, yeah? At 70% it will evaporate incredibly quickly, and it's the rapid evaporation that kills, not the actual liquid itself, yeah? So I'm just going to leave those there to dry for a minute. It's the drying process that does the killing. And in the meantime we'll go over to something else. Somebody on the Facebook group today said they've bought a little orchid and they got it home, and a few days later they've got mushrooms growing in the media. Now this can happen. The spores can remain dormant until the moisture's around, and what it often is in nurseries and places, they don't deal with little bags of potting media. They have a bin full of the flipping stuff, like a skip, yeah? And it's often open topped, and spores can get in there, and because it's dry, nothing really happens until you start watering it and it starts to retain moisture, and then those spores can become active. Now those little tiny mushrooms don't really do any harm as such, but the root systems on those will get into all the media and break it down really quickly. So any form of mould in your media will break it down, and it will also use up your nutrients that are meant to be for your orchid, so they're better not there. This is a good way of dealing with the plant. Now my orchid media is sterile, sealed in a bag, yeah, kept bone dry in the house, so the chances of anything getting in there are pretty slim. But this is hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2 chemically, yeah, and it's at 3%. I know some people go to 5%. I've never seen the need. This does the job. So some of that has gone into this little fine sprayer, and the whole of the bottom of the plant is now going to get sprayed with that. Yeah, so all the roots, the base of the plant, the lot is going to get a very fine spray. You won't be able to hear it because the microphone on the camera is probably not powerful enough, and my motor mouth is probably drowning it anyway. But what happens when this comes across anything a bit iffy? It fizzes, and that is basically destroying pathogens, mould spores, basically anything other than the roots and the small amount of media that's still left on there. It fizzes, yeah? If you want to see it fizz, I know your sink in your kitchen, you'll probably say, oh, it's very clean, I always clean it. Try squirting some of that on the base of your sink when it's dry. Then you'll find out how clean it is. It works, yeah? So now I'm just going to drop that in the sink and allow it to dry, basically. And what happens is when that stuff is active, yeah, it is H2O2, yeah? As soon as it's done its job, it becomes H2O. And as we all know, what is that? Water. So once it's done its job, it's water. It's harmless. Nonetheless, I still rinse my plant off. So I'm just going to pop that one in the sink. We'll give that a rinse off just to get those last little bits of media off. Now, we'll do the same with the other one. Have a look and see what's this one. The main reason I'm very interested in getting this one out of the pot is I want to see whether it is two plants as discussed in the previous video, or if it's a conjoined plant. In other words, it's grown a new plant from the base and it's now two plants joined together, which it may well be. But until we get out the pot, it's very difficult to tell. Oh, I don't like those clips. They really grab hold of the bloom spike. You notice the bloom spike is plenty sturdy enough to stand up on its own, but it does waggle around a bit. Yeah, if you stake them upright early in their life, yeah, you will get a nice upright display of blooms. And if you do it early enough, when the spike's quite young, all the blooms will be up the right way, and depending on your light source, they may even all face the same way. If you don't, they will probably arch over like that, and they look wonderful like that. I'd prefer them arching, but they take up a lot more space and they're a lot easier to knock, and possibly even knock your pot over in the process. So it's up to you. They look very natural and very nice arched over. Now this is probably, I was just going to say, this is probably not going to come out because it's got roots in the bottom, but they've come off. Right, just get the pot out of the way. Let's see what we've got here then. You notice here there is like a compacted coir or peat substitute plug. Yeah, this is not good stuff. It is when the orchids are seedling, very good stuff, because the roots are quite small and delicate when it's a little seedling plant. So when they, when they come out of their flask and they get potted up, they're potted in those little compact compressed plugs to grow on, and the roots push their way through as they would with any other garden plant in that type of environment. But they shut the air out basically. So as the plants mature, and this isn't such a good root system, but it's debatable. This, what I would call a discoloration on here, is probably the stain from that plug, because they should be between a white and a silvery grey colour, and when they're wet they're green. Yeah, we'll go into that later. Right, so what have we got then? Have we got two plants, or is this one plant joined together? It's still not obvious, you know. No, it's a oh, hang on. No, it is two plants. Yeah, see, they're just easily pulling away. There is no join there whatsoever. Now this often happens in the mass-produced nurseries, especially if they're automated. So I've actually got two plants now. Not quite what I wanted, but nonetheless this one has actually bloomed, so it's blooming size, so it will bloom again, and it's got a reasonable root system. Now that's an active growing root tip. You remember I said it will have a different colour on the end, so that's what they look like. It's the only one on there, and some of these roots are a little soggy. This one is. So you see, if I press it, it just collapses. It's papery, so that'll have to be trimmed off. We'll get to that in a bit. So we do have two plants, and up here we have a new root growing. Yeah? And some of these roots that have started growing have failed, yeah, for one reason or another, probably lack of moisture since it left the nursery. But we do have some roots, so that's one little plant. We'll do the same again. We'll give it a clean up, make sure there's nothing untoward. This one's actually got some little nubbins at the base, which are new roots, just starting. So we will get some new roots on this one soon, once it settles down in its new pot. So give it a good spray, make sure you soak it all backs, fronts, sides, bottoms, give it a good go. And that is now sterile basically, so there shouldn't be anything living on there that's capable of growing, apart from the plant itself. So that's that little one. Let's have a look at the other one, which is the one with the spike on. What have we got here then? We have got some dying roots here, look. You see the base of the plant looks manky, it's starting to rot, and that's because of that plug that just stays wet, never dries out, and that's not how these plants should be. Now that looks like quite a good root system, but I know from experience it's not. Some of these roots are probably going to fail in the pot. They still feel firm. See, there's a nice one that's branched out. This root should continue to grow. So will this one. And there are some new ones, signs of new ones. Yeah, but it's not a brilliant root system. Nonetheless, it's a healthy plant, and it has some roots. I've actually got Phalaenopsis, I used to grow a lot of these, out of a pot, and there are no viable roots left. They've all rotted. They've all gone, so they've been lost. So the plant has no way of hydrating itself because the roots are dead. Yeah? Now it will hang on for a while in that condition, but not for long. So it's at that point you sort of think, is it worth carrying on? And yes, it often is. If you plant it in a small pot with something like small bark with some sphagnum moss, because don't forget it hasn't got any roots, that extra moisture around the base of the plant might induce some new roots to grow, but it's got to be able to survive long enough for that to happen, and they often don't. They just don't make it. Gradually the leaves will wilt and they'll get crinkly and they will eventually die. Okay, so we've ended up with 3 plants, not 2. One is not in bloom, so we'll see how long it takes to bring that back into bloom. Okay, so that's got the plants out. All that's left to do now with those plants is to give them a rinse under the tap and trim off the roots. But I'm going to do that in the next video as part of repotting itself. This was what's in my pot. We've done that, yeah? And we've now got 3 plants instead of 2. But you can see that. I bet if I squeeze it I can wring water out of it. Yep. You see that? I'll make a mess. It's that wet. That's not good for epiphytes. No good at all. Right, so that's the what's in my pot bit. Now I shall have a clean up and start the second video. See you next time. Bye for now.